So once again, it's a frosty winter morning in a little fairyland tucked between Portugal and the Basque Country. And the topic of this little talk, this contribution to Dog Zen, is the Doggy Doo of Non-Duality. Now, I'll tell you something about investigating Buddhism. Whether you're someone like myself, who's investigated it off and on for over 50 years, or whether you're a total novice who decides to go and look into it, in both cases, you could compare that investigation to taking a lovely stroll in the park. So you get up one day and you think, I think I'll just take a lovely stroll in the park. Under the trees, go by the pond, look at the ducks. Dukkha, dukkha, dukkha. Dukkha is the Sanskrit word for suffering. And on the other hand, if you're me, then you get up one day and you say, well, I've walked down this path, a good many times over 50 years, but I think I'll go down again. I think I'll take another stroll down the path into the wild, wacky world of Buddhism. And so we set out. Let's say we're walking together. We're going to go and walk and talk about Buddhism. Investigate some of the scriptures, some of the source materials. And we enter the path. Remember, the view, the path, and the goal is the operative trope. You enter the path, and after taking no more than half a dozen steps, oops, what happens? I've stepped in something. You've stepped in something. And you look down, and there is a large, black, stinky pat of dog doo on your shoe. Now, that's not a very pleasant way to begin a walk, is it? And yet, every single time that you take a stroll into the world of Buddhism, you step on that doggy doo. It's inevitable. In fact, the entire path of Buddhism is littered with the doggy doo of the non-dual. The non-dual, or non-duality. That which is not dual. Now, hang on while I try to present a fair and honest paraphrase, a fair and accurate paraphrase of what Buddhists mean when they speak of the non-dual and non-duality. It's not something so very complicated. They refer continually to certain ontological and noetic propositions which are more or less obvious. For instance, the ordinary state of mind of the human animal comprises the awareness of a subject and an object, so that's duality. I'm the subject here sitting in the chair in the corner of the Guyanum studio, and I look out the window and I see the sky, and the window and the sky are objects separated from me, the subject, who is perceiving those objects. And so the subject-object dichotomy is inherent to consciousness of the world as we know it. So all the Buddhist teachings lay out this field proposition. That is to say, by a field proposition, I mean describe a description of the conditions and circumstances in which something is to be learned or something is to be realized. So we all live in the field proposition of subject-object dichotomy. So what is the non-dual or non-duality? Well, presumably, if you believe their claims, it is a state of awareness that you reach in Buddhism through meditation, in which there is no longer a contrast between subject and object. Subject and object disappear. The dualism of subject and object dissolves, and you find yourself in an awareness which is to be described how? Either as a pure subject with no object, not even having itself as an object, or a state of awareness in which neither subject nor object are present, and it is simply a pristine beholding with the characteristics of emptiness and clarity. Now, I don't think that I am misrepresenting the case here. I certainly hope not. And if what I've said is correct, then you have there a summary view of the Buddhist trope, the Buddhist meme, more properly speaking, of the non-dual, non-duality. Now, having laid that out, may I be so bold as to give you my definition of what non-duality is. This is my definition, the definition inherent to Dog Zen of non-duality. Non-duality is the reciprocal inherence of the dual and the non-dual. Period. Repeat. Non-duality is the reciprocal inherence of the dual and the non-dual. Get the drift? If you do, you may detect that there is something about that proposition, granted it's stated in highly abstract terms. It could be elaborated concretely, and I shall do so. But if you get the gist of it, if you get the drift of it, if you get the scent of it, then you may feel a bit of a tingle and a bit of a thrill. Because what does it do, actually? Well, it proposes that you get out of this dilemma of being either in duality or non-duality, that you get out of this situation where you have to go from a place where you are trapped, namely duality, to a place where you are free, namely non-duality. You're not trapped. You don't have to go anywhere. As a matter of fact, and it is a very great fact of noetic and ontological veracity, that at every single moment that you are aware, in your ordinary mind, you are aware of being in duality and non-duality simultaneously. And as a matter of fact, all of that la-di-da really comes down to common sense. One of the factors, that enables Buddhists to continually peddle this concept of the non-dual, the leading factor, in fact, is this. They operate a straw man argument about duality and non-duality. They claim that the subject-object dichotomy, perceiver-perceived, of ordinary consciousness is a state of duality that you have to overcome to reach the non-dual. That's a straw man argument. You are already experiencing the non-dual simultaneously with the dual perceiver-perceived dynamic. And isn't that obvious? They make it a big deal. They make it a straw man argument. They make it sound like the ordinary setting or default setting of the mind into perceiver-perceived is a problem. Hey, it ain't no problem because it coexists with a non-dual awareness. Non-duality in Dog Zen is the reciprocal inherence of the dual and the non-dual. And isn't that conformable to common sense? As I sit here, a perceiving subject, aware of my own mind, aware that I have a concept of self, part of my attention goes to myself in the form of a mirroring, and from that self-reflective mirroring, I hold the concept of myself as the perceiver and the subject, sitting here in the chair, and everything that I see is an object. It is obviously not me, not conceptually me, but it is substantially me. It is consubstantially me. Everything that I see as the perceiver, everything that is in the realm of the perceived, is consubstantially me as well. And I know that because I know that I am in this world, in this room, in this house, on this hillside, and that I am in fact in a non-dual relationship with all that. It's not even a relationship. It's a unity, that my presence in this room is unitary with the presence of the room. It's unitary with the presence of the house where the room is located. It's unitary with the presence of the land where the house is located that contains the room. It's unitary with the presence of the earth where the land is located, where the house is located, with the presence of the room. I am in unitary integration, even in my ordinary awareness. With all of that, I have the non-dual angle, the non-dual view, simultaneous with the dual view. So what's the fucking problem? Duality is not something to be overcome. On the contrary. On the contrary. So, returning to the little parable of the walk in the park, you are now free to investigate Buddhism, to look into it, and to look into Dog Zen without a concern about stepping into Doggy Doo, which is the issue of the dual and the non-dual. This is a non-issue in Dog Zen. It's not a bother. You're not bothered. Don't be bothered by that issue. It's extraneous and spurious. Yet why does that issue come up so often in Buddhism? In concluding this talk, I'll give you my nasty interpretation. I'll give you my nasty, disrespectful opinion. You see, in order for the whole system of Buddhism to persist and survive, there is an inherent assumption of superiority of realization. And that superiority of realization, which is ascribed to Rinpoches, lamas, and masters, carries authority. That is the authority. The authority of a Rinpoche is that he has a superior realization. A superior realization of mind, of the mind. Now, there are various aspects, various facets to that superior realization, presumed superior realization, which I could happily and easily specify and deconstruct, but I won't do that right here, right now. My point in concluding is to warn you that there is a really bad habit in Buddhism to hold the presumption of that superior realization over everyone else. So the Buddhists, in their own way, rather like Jews, like to play a game of overlords, but they disguise their overlord pretenses in a different manner than, say, the overlords of the Catholic Church or the overlords of Jewish supremacy. But one thing that you will notice, one thing that you will be able to detect, even if you are a novice looking into Buddhism for the first time, when you encounter the word non-dual, the non-dual or non-duality, you will detect that it comes with a force of intimidation. You're being told that there is something, there is a state of realization attained by Buddhist masters, which you perhaps could also attain if you follow the program of meditation they prescribe, that is called non-dual awareness. But as long as you don't have that non-dual awareness, then you're stuck and trapped in something. And so the non-dual awareness is held before you. The masters hold it before you as a goal to be attained, but it also comes across as a tool of intimidation. It's very intimidating to be told, in fact, that you're in this condition of the dual, of duality, and that you need to get out. And the way to liberation is through Buddhism, just as the way to salvation is through Catholicism, and the way to the correction of the world is through Judaism. Can you see those parallels? So, beware, be vigilant, be observant, so that you don't find yourself in a situation where you are intimidated, but you don't actually know how. You have a vague sense that you might be intimidated, but you can't quite put your finger on it. And of course, it's perfectly normal that you would not suspect that a Buddhist master who is dedicated to compassion and liberation of all sentient beings would come toward you with an intimidating premise. But they do. It is extremely intimidating. And as long as you step into the Doggy Doo of non-duality, you have that stench, you have that unpleasant impediment on your foot. And every footstep is contaminated by the Doggy Doo. But in Dog Zen, you clear the way of Buddhist shite by holding to the simple view, the simple and lucid view, that non-duality is the reciprocal inherence of the dual and the non-dual. If you look at that proposition, you see that there is no non-dual separate from dual. And if you look at your immediate experience, as I described for myself, sitting in this chair, well, it's blood simple, folks. you have already the simultaneous awareness of existing in duality, perceiver perceived, and in the non-duality of being consubstantial in presence with everything else that exists. There's no problem. And in fact, it even gets better. Not only does Dog Zen at the outset eliminate this problem and this intimidating factor, thereby removing the doggy do from your shoe so that you may have a pleasant and unencumbered stroll through the park. Pleasant and unencumbered stroll. Not only does it do that, but it takes you from that vantage point where you are already liberated from the problem of duality. It takes you into the magnificent propositions of Mayavada Vedanta. And what makes Mayavada Vedanta, which is a facet of Dog Zen drawn from the Vedic or Vedantic angle, what makes it so wonderful is that it gives you the asset and the tool of dynamic dualism. What is dynamic dualism? Well, it is the dualism of any thing or action or state and the description of it. It is the dualism of an object, like a chair, and the description of it. But that dualism is dynamic, meaning that the description can be developed and operated in such a way that it is equally dynamic and real as that which it describes. So, not only, I'm only introducing this here, obviously, and I don't want to go into another subject in a talk which ought to be as short as possible, concentrating on one particular subject, but I couldn't help bringing it up because I love it so much. And it's something that has liberated and enriched me endlessly through my entire life. The tool of dynamic description asserts, the rule of dynamic description asserts that description is dynamically real as much as that which it describes. So there is a fundamental duality that you work with all the time. Mayavada Vedanta is a dualistic method. You work with the duality of a thing, a being, a process, an event, a state, and its description. And the description is not merely something passive. It's as if you had a package, like a Christmas package wrapped in paper, and then on the package there's a label that describes the contents of the package. Well, in ordinary terms, the label describing the content of the package is not equivalent to what's actually in the package. But in Mayavada Vedanta, it is. The label, the description, is dynamically active, just like what's in the package, just like what it describes. So I couldn't help mentioning that. I realize it's a bit of a digression. And anyway, there you go. Make of it what you will. And enjoy. Enjoy what you know. And love what you know. And it'll love you back. Just like a dog.